On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Kelly Preston, actress, mother, and longtime partner of John Travolta, passed away on July 12, 2020, after a quiet, 2-year battle with breast cancer. Her death at the age of 57 was a private affair, kept from the public eye until after she had died, reflecting a deeply personal approach to illness and legacy that contrasted sharply with the celebrity culture of oversharing and media exposure. It was a dignified and quiet departure from a woman who had lived most of her life in the spotlight. Preston's death occurred during a turbulent period in global history, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, when the world was already grappling with the fragility of life and the unseen battles individuals were facing. In that sense, her passing was emblematic of the era, an intimate struggle with mortality kept largely behind closed doors, reminding us that not all losses are loud or public. It also spotlighted the evolving perception of fame. Preston had achieved considerable success, but she remained grounded, often taking a backseat to her husband's global stardom while still commanding respect through her own talents and grace. The immediate consequence of her death was a wave of tributes from both the entertainment industry and the public. Known for her roles in films like Jerry Maguire, Twins, and For Love of the Game, Preston had long been a familiar and comforting presence on screen. Her death brought renewed attention to her career as fans revisited her work with a more appreciative eye, acknowledging the warmth and humanity she brought to her roles. Moreover, her passing reignited conversations about breast cancer awareness, particularly about the need for regular screening and the deeply personal choices women make regarding treatment and disclosure. Her silence during her illness was not avoidance, but perhaps a testament to her desire to protect her family and live without the shadow of public pity. Kelly Preston's legacy is preserved in the films she made and the family she cherished. She is remembered in interviews, retrospectives, and the heartfelt tributes from co-stars and loved ones. Her death reveals how memory and mortality intertwine. Not all who shape our lives do so with fanfare. Some leave quietly, their impact no less profound. In art, in family, and in remembrance, we continue to find meaning in their presence, even after they are gone. Ruth Westheimer, the famed sex therapist and media personality, passed away on July 13, 2024, at the age of 96 from natural causes. Her death marked the end of an era in which conversations about sex, once whispered or stigmatized, were brought into the open with warmth, humor, and candor. Known simply as Dr. Ruth, her passing invites reflection on how one woman revolutionized the way generations talked about intimacy, consent, and communication. Born Carola Ruth Siegel in 1928 in Germany, Westheimer survived the Holocaust after being sent to a Swiss orphanage as a child. Later, she served as a sniper in the Israeli Haganah before emigrating to the United States. Her eclectic life experiences gave her a unique perspective that she brought to her career as a sex educator and radio personality in the 1980s. At a time when the AIDS crisis and sexual taboos dominated public consciousness, Dr. Ruth offered an open forum, particularly on her radio show Sexually Speaking, where no question was too awkward and every person deserved respect. Her death came at a time when society was once again navigating complex questions about identity, gender, and bodily autonomy. In that way, her passing mirrored the ongoing tensions between conservative and progressive cultural currents, underscoring how far society had come and how much further it still must go. Dr. Ruth championed not just the mechanics of sex, but the dignity of the individual, a value increasingly crucial in today's polarized climate. The immediate reaction to her passing was one of gratitude and reverence. Tributes poured in from fellow educators, celebrities, and longtime fans who credited her with destigmatizing sexual education and helping them form healthier relationships. Institutions such as Planned Parenthood and universities remembered her not only for her media persona, but also for her scholarly contributions, including numerous books and lectures. Dr. Ruth's legacy is immortalized in the numerous ways she reshaped public discourse. Statues may not bear her likeness, but she lives on in documentaries, academic texts, and the confidence of those she helped empower. Her life and death illustrate that mortality need not diminish a voice. It can amplify its echo. As society continues to grapple with issues of power, intimacy, and identity, Dr. Ruth remains a guiding spirit in the ever-evolving conversation about what it means to be human. Bobby Mercer, a beloved figure in American baseball, passed away on July 12, 2008, at the age of 62 after a prolonged battle with brain cancer. His death was natural but deeply emotional, not just for the sports community, but for countless fans who had followed his journey from promising athlete to revered broadcaster and mentor. Mercer's passing symbolized a broader cultural reverence for integrity, loyalty, and the golden era of baseball, values that resonated strongly with the American public during his lifetime. Mercer's career began with great expectations. Signed by the New York Yankees straight out of high school, he was heralded as the successor to the legendary Mickey Mantle. While he never quite reached Mantle's superstardom, Mercer carved out a distinguished career, earning 5 All-Star selections and a Gold Glove. Beyond his stats, it was his dedication to the game and to the Yankees organization that defined him. He remained a vital part of the Yankees family even after his playing days, transitioning seamlessly into a broadcasting role that made him a familiar voice in households across the country. His battle with glioblastoma, one of the most aggressive forms of brain cancer, was both courageous and public. Even as his health declined, Mercer continued to appear on Yankees broadcasts, often sharing his gratitude and faith with fans. His death came at a time when conversations around athlete health, particularly long-term neurological issues, were gaining prominence. In this sense, Mercer's struggle highlighted the quiet bravery of athletes who face illness with the same dignity they once brought to the field. The immediate response to his death was one of profound sorrow, especially within the Yankees community. The team held a moment of silence, and tributes poured in from players, commentators, and fans alike. For many, Mercer's passing marked the end of an era where sports figures weren't just celebrities, but symbols of hard work, humility, and consistency. Mercer's legacy lives on in the memories of fans and in the charitable foundations he supported, particularly those fighting cancer. His life reminds us how deeply sports figures can touch public consciousness, not just through victory, but through grace in the face of adversity. Through memoirs, highlight reels, and commemorative ceremonies, Bobby Mercer is immortalized not merely for what he did, but for who he was, a man who played the game with heart and lived life with courage. Paul Orndorff, known to millions of wrestling fans as Mr. Wonderful, died on July 12, 2021 at the age of 71. His death was natural, attributed to complications from dementia, a condition he had been battling for years. Orndorff's decline highlighted the physical and mental toll exacted on professional wrestlers, particularly those who came of age during the industry's explosive and unforgiving growth in the 1980s. His death served as both a sobering reminder of the sacrifices made by athletes in contact sports and a moment to reflect on the legacy of one of wrestling's most charismatic and controversial figures. Orndorff rose to fame in the World Wrestling Federation during the golden era of sports entertainment, marked by the rise of cable television and larger-than-life personas. His intense rivalry and eventual tag team pairing with Hulk Hogan made him a household name. A master of both physicality and showmanship, Orndorff's 1985 main event performance at the inaugural WrestleMania cemented his place in wrestling history. However, behind the bright lights was a brutal reality. Injuries, especially to his neck and arm, were long-lasting, and like many wrestlers of his era, he continued performing through pain, delaying necessary surgeries to stay relevant. Orndorff's diagnosis with dementia in his later years shed light on the long-term consequences of repeated head trauma in professional wrestling, echoing similar concerns raised in the NFL and boxing. His son publicly shared videos of his father's deteriorating condition to raise awareness, sparking conversations about wrestler health and the need for better long-term care and protections in the industry. The immediate response to Orndorff's passing was one of respect and remembrance. Tributes poured in from fellow wrestlers, fans, and organizations alike. WWE aired video packages, and longtime colleagues honored him as both a pioneer and a mentor. His death, though not a shock, emphasized the fragility of those who once appeared indestructible on screen. In death, Paul Orndorff became emblematic of wrestling's complex legacy, a blend of fame, physical excellence, and personal cost. We immortalize figures like him through Hall of Fame inductions, documentaries, fan conventions, and retrospectives that revisit not just their in-ring personas, but their human stories. Orndorff's passing reminds us that the path to greatness often comes at a personal price, and through remembrance, we continue to grapple with the fine line between spectacle and sacrifice in the pursuit of immortality. Alexander Hamilton's death on July 12, 1804, was a dramatic and violent end to the life of one of America's most brilliant founding fathers. Killed in a duel by Aaron Burr, his longtime political rival and then Vice President of the United States, Hamilton's demise was not only personal tragedy, but also a symbolic moment that highlighted the dangerous interplay of ego, honor, and political ambition in the early republic. The duel took place in Weehawken, New Jersey, the same dueling ground where Hamilton's own son Philip had died 3 years earlier under similar circumstances. Despite the illegality of dueling in both New York and New Jersey, the practice persisted among political and military elites as a way to defend one's reputation. Hamilton, who had publicly disparaged Burr's character and opposed his political aspirations, found himself cornered into accepting the challenge. Though Hamilton reportedly intended to throw away his shot, Burr took deadly aim. Hamilton was mortally wounded and died the following day. His death sent immediate shockwaves through the fledgling nation. Not only had one of George Washington's most trusted aides and the architect of the American financial system been slain, but he had died at the hands of another national leader in a private act of violence. Public opinion turned swiftly against Burr, who was charged with murder and politically disgraced, though never tried. Hamilton's death marked a turning point in the decline of dueling as a socially acceptable means of resolving disputes, particularly among public officials. Hamilton's legend only grew in the wake of his death. Though he had been a polarizing figure, accused by his opponents of monarchist leanings, his writings, policies, and influence became pillars of the American political and economic landscape. Over time, his contributions to the Constitution, his authorship of the majority of the Federalist Papers, and his vision of a strong central government were increasingly celebrated. The enduring fascination with Hamilton reveals much about how societies remember those who die young and in conflict. Through currency, statues, books, and most recently, the hit Broadway musical Hamilton, he has been immortalized as a visionary, a tragic hero, and a symbol of ambition and sacrifice. His death reminds us that while mortality ends a life, memory, and sometimes myth, can preserve a legacy far longer. In Hamilton's case, his tragic end ultimately amplified his influence on history. Minnie Riperton, a trailblazing singer celebrated for her five-octave vocal range and timeless hit Lovin You, died on July 12, 1979, at the young age of 31. Her death from breast cancer was natural but profoundly tragic, not only because of her talent, but because it brought the realities of the disease into the public consciousness at a time when open dialogue about breast cancer was still rare. Riperton had been diagnosed in 1976, shortly after reaching the peak of her career. Rather than retreat from the spotlight, she became one of the first celebrities to speak publicly about the disease, even serving as a spokesperson for the American Cancer Society. In a deeply human moment, she revealed during a talk show appearance that she had undergone a mastectomy, bringing visibility to a condition that was often shrouded in silence. This act of courage reflected the values of a changing era, an era where women were beginning to reclaim their voices and health with agency and dignity. Her passing shocked fans and colleagues alike. At the time of her death, Riperton was not only a rising music star, but also a mother, wife, and advocate. The immediate consequence of her death was the loss of a unique voice in both the musical and medical communities. However, it also sparked wider conversations about women's health, self-advocacy, and early detection, an impact that arguably extended beyond the music charts. Riperton's legacy was amplified in the years following her death. She became a symbol of artistic beauty interrupted by tragedy. Her music, particularly Lovin You, which she had dedicated to her daughter Maya, who would later become the actress and comedian Maya Rudolph, took on new emotional depth. Audiences heard not just a beautiful song, but a maternal lullaby from a woman who knew her time was finite. Her death reveals how mortality often grants deeper meaning to a life's work. In Riperton's case, her vulnerability and grace in the face of illness became as inspiring as her extraordinary talent. We immortalize her through continued plays of her recordings, tributes from contemporary artists, and the activism her openness inspired. She reminds us that even lives cut short can echo loudly if lived with purpose, creativity, and authenticity. Erasmus, the Dutch philosopher and theologian, died on July 12, 1536, in Basel, Switzerland, at the age of approximately 69. His death was natural, likely due to complications from dysentery, a common and often fatal illness during the 16th century. His passing marked the end of a life dedicated to humanist scholarship, theological inquiry, and the pursuit of moderate reform during one of the most turbulent periods in European history, the Reformation. Erasmus lived in an era defined by religious upheaval. While Martin Luther's radical calls for reform split Christendom, Erasmus championed a middle path, criticizing the corruption of the Catholic Church, but rejecting schism and violence. His writings, such as In Praise of Folly and the Handbook of the Christian Knight, used wit and scholarship to urge internal reform and spiritual renewal. At the time of his death, Europe was rapidly polarizing, and Erasmus's plea for dialogue and unity was being drowned out by more extreme voices on both sides. The immediate consequence of Erasmus's death was a symbolic loss for the moderate voice in European Christianity. Without him, the intellectual middle ground began to shrink. His absence was felt by scholars who viewed him as a guiding figure of Renaissance humanism, one who believed that faith and reason could coexist harmoniously. While Luther's legacy surged forward, Erasmus's vision was increasingly overshadowed by doctrinal rigidity and sectarian conflict. However, his death also crystallized his legacy. Arasmus came to be remembered not just for his theological positions, but for his commitment to learning, reason, and peace. In many ways, his death amplified his legend as a man of letters who strove to reconcile ancient wisdom with Christian virtue in an age of intolerance. His passing reveals much about humanity's relationship with mortality and memory. Arasmus did not seek political power or martyrdom. Rather, his influence stemmed from persuasion, scholarship, and moral authority. His posthumous reputation grew, especially during the Enlightenment, when thinkers revived his ideas about education, tolerance, and the necessity of critical inquiry. We continue to honor Erasmus through educational institutions bearing his name, such as the Erasmus University in Rotterdam and the Erasmus Program in the European Union, which fosters student exchange in the spirit of cross-cultural understanding. His legacy lives in the pursuit of knowledge tempered with humility, a testament to the enduring power of intellect over ideology. Gusty Huber, the Austrian-American actress best known for her role as Edith Frank in the original Broadway production of The Diary of Anne Frank, died of natural causes on July 12, 1993, at the age of 78. Her death marked the quiet conclusion to a life lived under the shadow of controversy, shaped by both artistic acclaim and the political complexities of wartime Europe. Born in Vienna in 1914, Huber rose to prominence in the 1930s and early 1940s as a successful actress in German-speaking cinema during the Nazi era. While she was never formally accused of being a Nazi sympathizer, rumors and suspicions about her wartime associations followed her throughout her life. Some contemporaries questioned whether she had actively distanced herself from Jewish colleagues or benefited from the Nazi regime's support of Aryan performers. These questions resurfaced sharply when she was cast in the 1955 Broadway production of The Diary of Anne Frank, a profoundly symbolic and emotional portrayal of a Jewish family persecuted by the Nazis. The controversy surrounding Huber's casting reflected the cultural and ethical tensions of the post-war period. At a time when America was still coming to terms with the Holocaust and grappling with its own conscience about justice and memory, the idea of a woman with suspected ties to the Nazi era portraying Anne Frank's mother struck many as morally ambiguous. Yet Huber's performance was widely praised for its emotional depth and sensitivity, creating a complex dialogue between past and present, art and accountability. Her death in 1993 passed with little fanfare, but it closed the chapter on a life that embodied the uneasy reconciliation between personal legacy and public memory. Huber did not alter the course of history with her death, but her life invites deeper questions about forgiveness, historical complicity, and the role of art in healing. In remembering figures like Gusty Huber, we confront the duality of human legacy. She is immortalized not only through her performances, but also through the questions her career continues to raise. How do we reconcile an artist's talent with their political associations? Can performance transcend history, or is it forever bound by it? We preserve such legacies through critical remembrance, films, biographies, stage revivals, and scholarly examination. Huber's story, woven with complexity and contradiction, reflects our ongoing struggle to balance mortality with moral memory. Her life, like many others of her era, serves as a reminder that the echoes of history linger long after the final curtain falls. Evan Wright, an American journalist and author renowned for his searing wartime reportage, particularly Generation Kill, has made significant contributions to modern journalism and war literature. Though still living, imagining a reflection on his death allows for an exploration of how his work might be viewed in a posthumous light, drawing attention to the intersection of media, truth, and the cultural memory of war in the early 21st century. Had Evan Wright passed at the height of his influence, the circumstances of his death, presumably natural or illness-related given his civilian status, would likely reflect the internal toll of chronicling trauma, violence, and moral ambiguity. His immersion in frontline experiences, particularly as an embedded journalist with the 1st Reconnaissance Battalion during the 2003 invasion of Iraq, represented a shift in how war was presented to the public. Unlike the sanitized reports of earlier decades, Wright's writing bore the raw imprint of soldiers' language, behavior, and ethical contradictions, mirroring a society grappling with the blurred lines of modern warfare and patriotism. The immediate consequence of such a passing would likely be a renewed examination of his role in shaping how America understood its post-9/11 military engagements. His work, stripped of the glorification often attached to combat, humanized soldiers while simultaneously indicting the systems that deployed them. His death might catalyze academic and cultural efforts to preserve his legacy, not only as a chronicler of war, but as a voice that challenged institutional narratives. In the broader arc of history, the impact of Wright's literary death would be subtle but enduring. Unlike political leaders or revolutionaries whose deaths pivot nations, the death of a journalist like Wright underscores the quieter yet essential battle for truth. His legacy would live on in journalism courses, military ethics debates, and media critiques, a reminder that storytelling is a form of resistance. Reflecting on his hypothetical death illuminates the human need to preserve those who held a mirror to uncomfortable truths. It demonstrates how mortality intertwines with memory. When those who bear witness pass on, we look to their words for clarity and conscience. Wright, like others before him, would be remembered in the permanence of print, on-screen adaptations, and the institutional memory of a media landscape forever changed by his voice. Through these mediums, we immortalize not just the man, but the truths he dared to reveal.